Welcome, everybody, to the NARPM Radio Podcast. I'm your host, Pete Neubig, and today we have Robert Dell'Osso, the founder of Master Key Property Management. If you don't know Robert, he's been around. He's big, active in NARPM, which we greatly appreciate. He's come from the investment side, so he was involved in real estate and property management for most of his life, grew up in the industry, and he's successfully grown his company while establishing himself as a knowledgeable resource on investment properties in the Triangle. I'm guessing that's a North Carolina thing, the Triangle. Like we call it the H-Town, the Triangle. And Robert is actively involved in NARPM. So he holds the RMP designation. And then, all right, now he's got a lot of hats here. He is currently serving as the president chapter for the Triangle NARPM chapter. He's also the NARPM National Govt Affairs Committee chair and is the vice chair for NARPM Capital Summit in 2026. Robert, thanks so much for giving back to NARPM, but thanks so much for being here on the NARPM podcast.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. I just flew in last night from the 26th NARPM Capital Summit in DC, so it was great. Everybody should try to attend that conference at least once. Really great masterminds. It's a small conference, about 125, 150 attendees. They do a day on the Hill. They set up appointments to go, talk to legislative staff, get the issues across that are important to NARPM, such as things around the CARES Act, lead-based paint, reforming HUD. We had some speakers come in from HUD. We had an assistant secretary from HUD come in. He was very well received because the current HUD administration strongly believes in enforcing fair housing laws as written, not based on, political ideology, crazy interpretations. It's not an adversarial relationship. That's always kind of the vibe we got in the past. They're very outgoing. I had some hallway conversations with them outside of the speaking engagement, and they were just super friendly and outgoing. And one of the big things they teased was we should be getting new HUD guidance later this spring around assistance animals, ESAs. Previously HUD withdrew that guidance. I think it was last fall. So excited to hear what that'll be.
So do you find that we have people like in the government that's actually on our side now? Whereas because we have so many resident or tenant advocacy groups, but we only have one landlord advocacy group that I know of, which is NARPM.
Yeah, I think so. In the past, and this is my third year going to the Capital Summit. And I think, before that, it was kind of just a day on the Hill. So it's evolved as a conference and as NARPM has evolved, right? So I talked to some of the longtime folks like Keith Becker, who was the chair this year. He remembers when it was just kind of a get together day on the Hill, and you'd go up for a day and try to leave some information with your representatives and senators' offices. And now it's much more structured because NARPM as an organization has evolved, right? We've got full-time government affairs staff, right? Tyler Craddock. We had Troy, who's now the NARPM CEO. And there's really, every year it grows from an advocacy standpoint, and it formalizes more and more. And it's important, right? Because like Tyler says, if you don't have a seat at the table, you're on the menu. We've got to look out for the industry, and it's not adversarial lookout. It's we know how to manage houses better than anyone else, right? NARPM members do, I'll argue. So let's not put in place regulations that hinder our ability to properly manage homes, to make it so it's still a viable investment for owners, right? Because if you make it too hard, they'll just get out of it. And then he drives up the cost of housing. There was somebody mentioned up from the Northeast when I was there this week that they read there's 50,000 housing units sitting unused in New York State because there's so much regulation. It would cost them enormous amounts of money in losses. So they'd rather just let them sit empty and take the write-off loss. That's crazy to me, right?
That's nuts. Yeah. As an investor, I can't even think about that. I'm like, get my houses leased.
I would have heartburn, but if you can't lease it for what a true market rent is,
right, It's going to cost,
It's
and then you
hard.
got to, and then you have to take care of all of the maintenance or whatever. I mean, it's like
Right.
crushing
And it's
money.
not that people want to slumlord it, so to speak. It's, I can't afford to do what maintenance costs if I can't pull in rent to even
I can't
pay for
recover.
that
Yeah,
maintenance.
and I know in New York now, what is it, 9.5% increase in property taxes? The new mayor is proposing.
There it was, yeah, or 10 something crazy.
Yeah,
Like, what do you do? It's just,
so
I don't know.
tell me,
It's
what
crazy.
exactly does day on the hill mean? Like, so do you actually just go from office to office of different? Is it senators? Is it just congressmen? Like, where are you actually?
Both. Yeah, it's both. So, and you don't typically meet with the elected officials,
Right.
and some people don't realize that. Yeah, those are good photo ops, but you really want to meet with their staffers. You want to meet with the staffers that are responsible for housing, because they're the subject matter experts that the elected officials rely on for policy and voting. They're going to go to, you know, John or Jane Doe, their housing staffer, and say, what do I need to know about housing? Oh, well, we've had these groups, these property managers from NARPM coming in. They're the industry association. They gave us all this great information on housing and like what we need help, they need help with. Getting in front of them goes exponentially farther than just sending a form email.
Yep.
It's voice of the customer, so to speak.
So what were some of the points that NARPM was trying to bring up to some of these staffers?
Yeah, so the big one is we're still working on the CARES Act 30-day notice, which technically is still 30-day notice to vacate out there because that did not sunset. It was very ambiguous language. Some state Supreme Courts have ruled that it went away when the CARES Act went away, but if you ask an attorney like Monica Gilroy, she'll tell you it's still there technically. So you want to get rid of that. And then, of course, the lead-based paint rule, which requires property managers to be certified in lead-based paint renovation and repair, which was not always the case up until a few years ago when they changed like 2 or 3 words in an FAQ, right? So, and then there's property managers in every state getting audited and fined by the EPA. In a lot of cases, they didn't even know they had to be certified. We use the argument of, that's like saying I, as a property manager, need to have an HVAC license to go hire an HVAC firm, right? We
Right.
previously had the responsibility. We had to hire lead-based paint certified firms to do repairs on pre-1978 houses,
Mhm.
and there's some other requirements in there, but we didn't have to be certified. So now they changed that FAQ kind of on the sly, really, and it all of a sudden exposed property managers all over the country. And I know Monica has been great about going around to NARPM events, NARPM chapters, and preaching like, hey, you've got to get certified to protect yourself. I mean, they'll start out with, she was up on stage saying, they're going to start out and try to fine you $5, $6, $7, $800,000, right? That's like, they can give you a heart attack as a business owner. She literally had an experience of somebody called her because they sent over this audit thing and the guy started having chest pains and went to the hospital because it freaked him out so much. Like, it shouldn't be about trying to scare people to death, literally, right?
Literally, yeah.
We're not trying to do anything shady, but if you got to do things that make sense. And she likes to use the term disparate. Like, it's not fair, right? You shouldn't be trying to find a property manager out of business. Like, it should be about like, hey, we need to educate you to make sure you do the right thing based on the regulations. And then if you don't comply, maybe there's a problem, right? If you ignore it, I get it. But most property managers, I would argue, don't even have a clue that they have to be certified in lead-based paint, renovation, repair.
Especially if you're not part of NARPM, right? I
Absolutely.
mean, we
Yep.
know, like, you go to any state conference, they have a lead-based paint course typically attached to that conference. In some,
We taught it at the Capital Summit last year. We brought in a guy and he taught it to half a dozen people or so.
I feel like it's everything that the government touches is just a money grab. Whether it's
It
you have
yeah.
to register your rentals in some small town USA, and it's just a money grab, and they have to then inspect it, or
Creates a bureaucracy.
yeah,
They had one in Raleigh for a few years and you had to pay like $25 a door or something like that. And if you got one or two properties, not a big deal. But if you're an apartment company, it's pretty hefty. And what they did with that funds was they went and then hired people to go around and try to catch people, right?
Yeah,
So,
it feels like it's like an HOA deal, just at the city level now.
and eventually the state changed the state law and said, well, you can have these registries, but you can't charge people. So what they do? They immediately dropped them all because they're like, well, if we can't make money off of it, we're not going to do it anymore.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. So
now you said you guys talked to a fair housing person. One of the things that I was always worried about fair housing was that disparate impact, where it's like, it's like, well, we don't really, we're not like, we can't really define what it looks like when you're not, when you are, negatively impacting somebody, race, color, creed, one of the protected classes. Is that something that you guys discussed at all while in there, or with the fair housing person, or was it more just on the assistance animals that they're really focusing on right now?
They touched on it some, and I know really like with it, the big theme from the NARPM side is like we're arguing there's disparate impact against property managers, touching back on the lead-based paint thing, right? Like, the fair housing the HUD people even said, because we made it clear, like, hey, we want to be your industry experts because we are the industry experts. So, Troy, CEO of NARPM, told the assistant secretary when we met we met outside the conference room or the big conference ballroom with the board, and the government affairs committee was there. And he said, please lean on us as an organization when you need to gather facts around, fair housing in terms of rental properties and property management. We are the industry organization around it. Like, we are the most knowledgeable. We're the experts. We'd be happy to provide you information that you need so you can better understand the industry in terms of, governing the industry. Don't just go to the tenant rights groups, right? Because you're only going to get one side.
Yeah, I think if you listen to this and you are a member of NARPM, I think one of the benefits of NARPM is that we do have these folks here. And so if you are getting sued by somebody, like, you can call NARPM and they can give you kind of an opinion, right? We know Monica is basically, what is she? She's counsel for, I know she has her own company, but she's like literally a counsel for NARPM, right? She can help me.
Yeah, so she's new. This is new. Like, she's basically like the NARPM legal hotline, right? You get a letter from EPA or something, or from HUD, like, pick up the phone and call her. She's going to have a conversation with you. She's, from what I understand, she's working on setting up a legal hotline, like a lot of state realtors associations have. But like, you can just call her and she'll tell you, right? Like, give you some advice as a member, right?
She'll point you in the right direction, at least.
That's right.
And that's the main thing, because you get sued and you don't even know where to go, right? It's like we all have, like, I think a lot of us have like eviction attorneys or real estate attorneys, but then it's like, do you have a business attorney? Like, do you have a government affairs attorney? You're gonna get sued at some point. It's just not. It's a matter of if. It's not a matter of if. It's a matter of when you're gonna get sued. And so, being a member of NARPM gives you a little bit of at least guidance on where to go and how to fight this thing.
Yeah, I mean, most people know, like, hey, you could call your business attorney or real estate attorney, like, hey, I've got a HUD complaint, or the EPA is coming after me. Who do I call? There's a good chance they don't even know who to refer you to, right? Because who practices in that niche legal representation space at the federal level? So that's why it's great to have that resource through NARPM, like Monica, right? Whether you hire her firm or not, she can probably refer you to somebody if you want to not use her and use someone else. She knows colleagues in the industry, right?
That's right.
Where you can hire her. I mean, she's great.
That's right.
She comes around to chapters. She speaks. She, I'm trying to get her to our chapter here in the next few months. And she's not out there like trying to make money off of traveling to educate people.
Yeah.
She's a great resource.
I think she's going to be speaking at the NARPM North Carolina conference in end of February, early March.
Yep.
which I think we're recording this right before that, but this will come out after that. So she's doing that.
I'm looking forward to seeing both you and her there.
Yeah, and she's speaking at broker owners. So like if you are a member of NARPM and all you're doing is going to local chapters, that's great. If as long as you're doing that, that's great. But there's also the national stuff is really where you start seeing value on your with your with your membership. And then they also have those, I think it was a weekly, they sent out the NARPM advocacy points, and the legislative teams is kind of keeping you up to date on stuff. So I think there's a lot more that NARPM has for the membership, especially on, fighting for us, for investors / landlords. So I think you want to make sure that as you join NARPM, take advantage of all of these, benefits that the organization has for us members.
Yeah, it's been phenomenal for me.
All right, Robert. So thank you for giving us the update on Dan Hill. And I need to get there. I have not been, and I need to get there. Politics just scares me. I just want DC
next year. I'm committing you to going
next year. All right, sounds like a plan. All right, so let's talk a little bit about. When you and I had talked a few weeks ago, and we're like, hey, man, let's get you on the pod. You're like, man, I would love to talk about like what structure looks like, org structure looks like for a startup, and then how you morph that structure as you grow. So let's talk a little bit about company org structure, like when you're starting up versus like how many doors before you kind of morph into a different structure. And let's talk about org charts.
Okay.
So tell me where you start.
So when I started 10 years ago, this is our 10th year with Master Key. From when I started Master Key, I started with the doors that I owned, 3 or 4 doors, personal rentals. Got set up on Appfolio, hired a firm to do some Google AdWords for me to get some properties. Got my first property, was like super excited, but it was literally just me, right? I was doing everything. And yeah, that's probably pretty easy if you got, just a handful of properties, but maintenance requests would come in. I went out and fixed it myself. I thought this is going to be easy, right? Well, then you start adding more properties and you realize, wait a minute, I can't fix this. I've got to find a handyman. I've got to build a relationship with, the handyman, the plumber, the HVAC, the electrician, and it's hard to do. Like you can call them up. They probably get calls all the time. Hey, I'm building a property management company and I'm trying to build a list of my good vendors. And, at first you haven't given them any business. So they've got a lot of paying customers. So how do they prioritize that? But, I went through some handyman and some plumbers and some HVAC companies and stuff like that, and kind of trial and error, right?
Oh man, I had a handyman once, and he was on his way to do a ticket for me. And he never got there. And I'm like, holy crap, did he die in a car accident? Oh no, he got a call for a tile job, which paid more. So he diverted and went to that job instead.
I eventually hired my handyman, and he's been with me for 5 years.
Interesting.
Because I joined, a year or two in, I joined a BNI group trying to build my business, and I met a lot of good vendors in that space too, right? So I had a handyman that I was using, and he did work for me, and he did work for others. Well, eventually he retired. He announced to the group after a couple of years, he's like, hey, I'm retiring. I got a sailboat. My dream is to sail 6 months out of the year. And I'm like, well, that sounds awesome, but who am I going to call now, Dave? His name was Dave. And he said, call my brother Pete. He does this too. So I called Pete, and Pete, I introduced who I was and blah, blah. He said, yeah, I do handyman stuff too. A lot of my brother's clients have been calling me. And so he worked with me for a few years, but I found that, he had other customers, right? So I was always chasing the schedule, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And I finally went to him and I said, hey man, I'm getting big enough. I need to control the schedule. How about if I hire you and put you on full time? I'll pay you a salary. I'm not even going to pay you hourly. I'll pay you a salary. You don't have to chase jobs. You don't have to worry about putting in hours to make a certain amount, whatever. And, you work for me And he's thought about it for like 2 or 3 days, came back, and he's like, that sounds great. Let's do it. So he shut down his company and went to work for me. And he's been with me for, 5 or 6 years.
So, all right, let's talk a
It's
little bit
great.
about that, right? So, how many units were you at that created? So I'm asking how many units, because we know how many tickets were created, right? Because you have to have the volume, and then how much revenue were you making so that you can afford this person?
Yeah, I was probably in the mid 100s. I went upper 100s in doors.
Okay, so I would have thought more. I would have thought around 300. So 150 to 200 around there.
Yeah, probably close to 200. But yeah, when we started with that, and at first it was a bit of a stretch, right? Like keeping him busy. But I knew because we've had a BDM that role filled for 5+ years, so I knew we were going to be continuing to add doors, right? So I tell everyone now, hire proactively, not reactively, because it's so much easier to do it, right? So I said, you know what, I'm gonna hire the handyman, even if it's a break-even thing, or if I hate to lose any money, but let's just shoot for at least a break-even thing. But I'll have him in working for me. I'll control the schedule, the quality, and it'll be good. And now I'm at a little over 500 doors, and my handyman, we send overflow work to a couple other handyman. I haven't pulled the trigger to hire a second one yet, but we've got a couple of really good local guys that we can send overflow work to, and that works for them because I think they don't want, like, for whatever reason, they maybe have some other customers, some other PMs they work for. But I could see us eventually hiring a second.
What is your handyman doing though? Is he just doing the maintenance tickets, and then you have a crew, like a company, a third party company that does the turns? Is he doing the turns? Is he AC certified? Give me a little bit more information.
So our handyman, I don't have him doing work on the turns because I can't really have him locked up on a project for 2 or 3 days. I have him handling the existing tenants, submit a maintenance request, running toilet, running faucet, whatever, the light's not working. I changed the bulb, it's still not working. The door lock isn't working. Handyman stuff, right? Change an outlet, change a switch, no problem. He's not doing really heavy electrical, change a fan, stuff like that. There's no problem. Light, plumbing, clogged drain. Oh, my sink drain's, leaking or something like that. He'll fix that. He's pretty good at figuring stuff out too, but he also knows that, like, he knows when to call in the expert. Like, hey, he'll go look at it and do a quick look, and he won't kind of trial and error, which can make things worse. He's really good at, he will say, go back to the maintenance coordinator and say, hey, I think you need to send an electrician out for this one, right? Or send a plumber out. It's a little bit bigger of a job. I can kind of triage and mitigate right now, but we should get a plumber out to really dig into this, something like that.
So that means, one of the mistakes I make, I tried this and it didn't work. And the reason why it didn't work, now that I'm hearing you talk, is I was having my guys do the turns, and they were on salary. So turns would take 6 days. Once I let them have their own company, that same turn would take a day and a half.
Right. I use 2 turnover companies, 2 separate ones, because I kind of also, and they know that too, right? Like, hey, I got 2 companies. So, like, I feel that their performance and their speed to turn is, when they know there's competition out there that they're going against, improves a lot.
Now, because you have a maintenance guy in there, you still need your AC people and your plumbers and all that stuff. But you're sending him first. He double checks it. Can he change out something real quick, fix it, or does he have to go ahead and get the AC company out there? A lot of times you do that.
Yeah, I mean, if they submit a request like my AC is not working, we usually just go straight to the AC company, right? Something like that.
Do you are you rebranding all of your invoices to your company, to Master Key? Was it Master Key Property Management, or are you just taking that? If it's an AC company, you're just sending that invoice over to the investor?
sending that AC invoice company that AC invoice directly over. We
Yep.
don't do any of the markups on that. Now, honestly, from a business structure standpoint, I've thought about, because I kept my maintenance company separate. It's a separate LLC, separate EIN, all that, and it just has the handyman in it and myself as an employee technically.
Okay.
One thing I've thought about doing is, why don't I run all the turns through there, right? Make a little money on that, because I'm getting such great, honestly, I feel in my market, I'm getting really good pricing for my turnover crews because I give them a lot of volume, right?
Right.
500 plus doors, they're getting a lot of good work. So our pricing is extremely competitive, and especially around things like paint. I can get painting, like full paint walls and trim, for roughly $2 a square foot. Whereas in our market, if a homeowner calls a painting company they have no relationship with, it's probably going to be between $6 to $8 a square foot.
Oh yeah. Some property managers in their agreement have, where if they have to oversee a turn, that there's a 15% or a 10% or something like that.
Yeah, like a cost plus. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Now, okay, so one of the challenges I did is I had my maintenance guys under Empire, under my property management firm, and so I actually lost clients because like they get upset about the invoice that we sent them, especially on the turns, right? So you're doing good by having a good turn team, third party, but or we would eat a lot of cost, right? Because they would be upset. I mean, everybody's upset over everything, by the way. As soon as they have to put money into any property, it's like, well, I don't want to pay you for this, or I'm going to fire you because of X, Y, and Z. So we saw that as a challenge. So having a separate entity that didn't have Empire in the name would probably be a much better solution for us. So that's pretty smart. But I'm hoping you're not calling it Master Key Maintenance.
We do actually, but it's always just been the handyman, and that's the only thing that it bills. And
Right.
I have had no pushback on that, because the owners know, if we're onboarding a new owner, when we started it up 5 or 6 years ago, it was, here's the hourly rate and here's why we charge what we charge. We're sending in a handyman who is, insured. The company has insurance. We have workman's comp on him. We have strong liability policies. They're really good insurance companies. This is to protect you, because, anybody can become a handyman, right? In our state, there's no handyman license. There's no, it's 640. The job has to be over $40,000 before it requires a general contractor's license in North Carolina.
Nice.
Most things. The handyman's going in and out and fixing.
To me is the same thing as us getting a lead-based paint license. So
right. So I mean, and your HVAC guys have to have a license, right? So, and your plumbers do. So that's covered under that. But
yeah. It's
more about the liability. You like, if my handyman goes into a house and he hurts himself, it's insured, and it's insured, I think, pretty strongly, because I'm a big believer in insuring for proper coverage versus just like buying a cheap policy to say you have it.
Right.
So it's more about owner protection and liability protection.
So, all right. So you got to about 200 units. You decide to hire you take the maintenance guy. Curious, on your maintenance, do you like some companies charge a percent, some companies charge a flat fee override, like, hey, we're going to charge you, Mr. Investor, to run this maintenance request. Is that kind of big in North Carolina, or is most people not charge any kind of maintenance fee?
I would say most are not. I mean, of the other PMs I talked to, my PM colleagues in our local chapters, most are not charging a maintenance coordination fee. I know a lot of people do, and they strongly push it.
Yeah,
but we found,
because it costs us a lot of money to run maintenance.
It does, right? Yeah. So I mean, we have had a lot of pushback in the new client process when you're trying to sell your company to onboard a new client, right? In the BDM role on markup, because most are not, and they're even advertising on their website, hey, we're not marking up maintenance, right? So it's a hard sell in our area, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Do you guys do a vendor rebate program then? So like, you're 600 units, you're giving the AC guy $1 million a year in business. Do you have like any kind of rebate? Like at Empire, we had like a 10%, like we called it a marketing fee. Like, here's a rebate because I'm doing all the marketing for you, getting you business. So I got, I would get like a 10% rebate. It's kind of the way we ran it.
Yeah, I haven't, and here's why. Because I've had relationships with these vendors since before I knew that rebate existed. So just personally, I would have a hard time going back to them now and saying, "Hey, I know you've been working with me for 7 or 8 years, but now you need to start rebating me back."
Right.
I like the idea of it. I'm not going to lie and say I don't. I think there's some really good revenue to be made there. I just, I've got some personal relationships with some of these vendors, and I would just have a hard time doing it. Some of them have become really good friends of mine.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that also it's tough on the accounting side. Like we had trouble with our bookkeeping side of things to keep that. And then you also have that 10% creep. So, oh yeah, we'll give you 10%. And next thing you know, the cost goes up 10%.
Right. Their diagnostic fee went up 10%.
Exactly. Everything goes up. So it's the best solution I've seen is a couple. Like one is, I'm not a big fan of charging the client X% or a percentage of work order, because not every work order is the same. Like, I have a management company that runs my properties right now because I don't own a PM firm anymore, and they charge 15% for any kind of maintenance charge, right? Well, for something that's $100, not a big deal, but something that's $4,000, like changing out like a roof, we know that it's the same phone call, right? You're not you're not going there and doing anything different on a roof than you are like when a capacitor being changed out for $200, whatever. So I'm not a big fan of the percentage. I'm a big fan of a flat fee. Like, hey, it's a flat fee of X dollars. It's small enough where it just covers your costs of having the people run the maintenance thing all the way through, especially with the technology that we have now. So I'm a big fan of having a small fee versus a big percentage, or even the vendor rebate. One solution that I had, and Melissa Prandy came up with this one. I really like this. Is when you get big enough, right? You have a bunch of vendors you're giving a bunch of money to. Instead of charging a rebate, what she did is said at the beginning of the year, she had you could be a silver, gold, or platinum. I think she had 3 levels, and the vendors who paid the highest would get the first hit at the tickets. And so she had this vendor program. What I liked about it, it was yearly. It got paid in January. And so there was no cost creep because the guys are just paying one time, and the booking is super easy because you only have to have one bill one time. So I thought that was pretty unique
It is.
But I think the best solution is what you're doing, having a separate company that now I probably wouldn't have named it the same thing, but having your handyman just do the handyman stuff is great. And then you could what you could do, whether you can with the financials or not, is you could run everything through that company, put a small markup on there, and then rebrand the invoice. The challenge with that is if something's not working, it comes back to you and your company, not the third party company, right? So
right, it depends on what you want to run through it. And I've thought okay, well maybe the turns, right? Because that's easier in the sense of, hey, my turnover crews are going in, they're doing paint, flooring, miscellaneous repairs, blinds, or whatever. That's pretty, easy, so to speak, right? Versus you run an HVAC replacement through and something goes wrong with the HVAC and, it gets a little convoluted, but there's not really a lot of warranty follow-up, so to speak, on turns with what the turnover crews are doing, especially if it's cosmetic stuff.
And there's not a lot of chance of getting sued either.
Right, because you're putting in, you're painting, you're doing flooring, even if you're refinishing cabinets, counters, granite, something like that. So, right, the liability is minimized in that scenario.
Okay, so all right, so we're running out of time. We completely took a left turn here, but it was good. So in your experience, you're saying around 200 units, you could have basically a handyman work for you. Is that?
Yeah. And it depends on the class of properties you have, right? Are you bringing in stuff that's all less than 10 years old? You may not even need it, right? Or a lot of new construction stuff. Sure. But in our area, I wouldn't say our stuff is old, but there's a lot of stuff built in the 90s and early 2000s. So they're at the point where you get quite a bit of handyman work. Um, and I think it can make sense, right? It could even be less doors depending on your market. If you're in a market that has a lot of older stuff, like up in the Northeast or Chicago or something, right? And they're in there all the time fixing stuff, and
Yep.
shoot, you may only need 100 doors.
How many tickets are you averaging a month per unit? Do you track those numbers at all?
I haven't. I was looking at it, but before we hired our current maintenance coordinator, at any given point, I was probably having around 140, 150 open tickets. Now, some amount of those are things like HVAC preventative maintenance that we open twice a year,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we probably have 24 to 30 recurring landscaping at houses where the owner covers the landscaping. And that's, from the growing season for us, right? Like, so it's a March through October or something like that. So it kind of fluctuates that. We're pretty good now where it's under, down around 100 or even a little less open tickets at any given point, which I'm happy to see because I don't know, it stresses me out if I see like 150, 180 open, tickets in there. I'm like, gosh, what's going on with these properties? Like, is stuff not getting fixed? But that's where a maintenance coordinator helps, right? Like, so whereas we use Appfolio and we use their new maintenance performer option, so it auto assigns stuff based on criteria. But I still firmly believe you need that human intervention. You need people looking at the stuff, right? So somebody submits a maintenance request, for a dishwasher. Well, go look at the history. Did we do something on that dishwasher recently? Have we sent people out there 2 or 3 times in the last year? Let's not send another person out. Let's go to the owner and say, hey, we've dishwasher broke again. We worked on it a couple times this year. We don't want to spend another diagnostic fee for you. Let's just replace it. So I think a good maintenance coordinator who looks at that stuff is important to have. And then even with like your pre-1978 houses, you're supposed to send out a Renovate Right brochure like between 7 and 30 days or something before, or no more than 30 days out for maintenance requests. Monica's got the details, but her advice is if you get a maintenance request on a pre-1978 house, just have a letter set up and you can shoot it over to the tenant. It's a no action letter. It's the EPA requires us to give you this brochure for your awareness, basically. They don't even need to sign it. You just need to prove that you sent it, and you can send it through.
Send it right through
for us through Appfolio or whatever your PM software is and track it. So I still think a good maintenance coordinator is important. I wish I had hired a maintenance coordinator sooner. I hired my first one last fall. I should have done it years ago.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, in your opinion, though, all right. So, your opinion, you need to have obviously a pretty decent unit count. You have to have a lot of tickets coming in, right? So for us at Empire, I think it was a little over half of our portfolio would put a ticket in every month. It was like 0.54 or 0.56. It's like ridiculous. It was like,
and it's always at least right after you renew their lease, right? They send in like 3
or new move-ins. New move-ins. We had a challenge with make readies, especially like new move-ins. It was just terrible. They put like 30 tickets in, but we had a lot of tickets in. So I love what you're saying. Like, look at your ticket count, look at the age of the houses, and to make that determination. I would say the other thing too is like, if you're running a chaotic PM firm, would you consider like hiring a maintenance tech at that point, or would you say, hey, let's make sure the maintenance firm is kind of like the management firm is working fine before we spin that out? Or what's your thoughts on that?
No, I think you can go ahead and do it because it should be one less thing you have to worry about. If you want to sub it out, you're still fighting things like scheduling control, right? Because you don't know how many other customers they have. right? So they got to kind of be, as a business, as a vendor, they want to be equitable, right? So they're like, well, I don't want to put all my eggs in one basket with one firm, because if they go away, then that can impact me. So I would rather spin that maintenance company up sooner rather than later and not have to worry about it, right? So if you get a good maintenance coordinator, good handyman, and they work hand in hand, that kind of takes some of the chaos away and lets you focus on improving your processes and how you do things in the PM side.
Did you have your handyman do like move out inspections and anything like that? Or did you have like a field technician or a realtor do all that?
So we have, we call them assistant property managers. Reality is they're more of a project manager because they're managing the make ready. So they do the move out inspections, and the quality checks and making sure that the work got completed, that's scoped out. That's what we use. And we've used that since we're about 125 doors is when I hired 70, actually about 75 to 100 doors. And I hired my first person to help with that. And it was part-time. Then they became full-time. And now we have a pod structure, really. So there's two pods. The pod is an assistant property manager that's out in the field locally, and their pod teammate is a remote team member. It's, because they're behind the computer all day long. Their remote team member is, right. So they can work hand in hand while they're there doing a move out inspection and start queuing up stuff and firing off requests for estimates, for vendor turnovers or whatever. Or they could just say, yeah, they moved out. This house is perfect. Let's get it clean the carpet and get it listed. And they can get all that stuff rolling. Because what we were finding was the assistant property manager, they'd be out in the field all day doing stuff. And then their day's over, and either they're doing it at night or they have to do it the next day, and you lose a day or two, right? And every day lost is a day of lost potential rent.
Yep. Yeah. All right, man. Well, we're up against it. I think we need to have you come back on so we can actually talk about the org structure and how we grow.
Anytime.
But we appreciate you sharing. We went on a left turn here, but I think it was actually, we got a little bit deeper on when or why you should hire a maintenance handyman, if you will. So, Robert, if somebody here, if somebody listens to this and they want to reach out to you and pick your brain on if they should hire their own personal handyman, or they want to talk a little bit more about the NARPM Day on the Hill, what's the best way to contact you?
Shoot me an email. It's my first name, Robert, at masterkeypm.com. I always love talking NARPM stuff with NARPM people. I mean, when I see you next week in Charlotte, I'm going to corner you, right? So we're probably going to talk maintenance coordination, because that's one of my hot topics right now. So I know you're an expert in that. So I'm going to get some of your time for sure next week.
Over a cigar for sure.
100%.
All right. And then if you need a maintenance coordinator, then look at VPM Solutions. We actually have a maintenance coordinator course that people can take before you hire them, pass them, get a certification. Go to vpmsolutions.com or email me, pete@vpmsolutions.com. And if you want to get the benefits of NARPM, you need to join. Go to NARPM, NARPM.org, or give them a call at 800-782-3452. Thanks, Robert, for being here. See you, everybody.